Hi, my name is Peter Fisher, and today I would like to introduce a new webcast series that I've been putting together based on the MYSQL Console. Now, this series will demonstrate different types of queries of MySQL, such as creating databases, dropping those databases, creating the tables in those databases and altering their structure, as well as a few common queries such as the select query, the insert query, update and delete and so forth. But today I would like to focus solely on the console itself. Now, the MySQL console is available on multiple platforms, so Macs, Windows and Linux. For these examples I'm going to be using the Ubuntu variant of Linux. But the commands within the console are very much the same throughout all platforms. Okay, so without further ado, let's dive in. So we need to connect to the console by typing in the MySQL command. Now there's three common flags that are required, two of them which are required, which is the -h, -u, -h and -p. The first flag, -u, is the username, so Pete test1. Obviously this will be different for yourselves. -h is the host name. Now this could be, your MySQL databases could be on an external machine, and so you might be using an IP address. By default though, it's set to the local host, which is what this is currently set to, but I'm just going to include it for demonstration purposes. So -h is the local host. Now -p is the password. Now if I leave that blank and I press enter, I get a prompt for that. So if I type that in now, press enter, we are now in the console. Now at this point we don't know what databases are available to this user, and the MySQL, the console, the syntax for the console is very verbose. So we need to show these databases, and we literally type in show databases. Now every command in the MySQL console must end with the semicolon. Without the semicolon, if I was to just press enter, I would get one of these arrows, and these arrows denote the start of a new line. It allows you to construct a query on multiple lines and makes it more easier to read. So if I put in semicolon and enter, we can see here that there's two databases available to this user, the first being the information schema and the second being the test database. So for these tutorials we're going to use the test database, so we literally type in use test. And we can see here that the database has changed to point to the test database. Now we need to find out what tables are available to us on this database. So again we use the show command and we do show tables. And we can see that there's one table in this database, and that is the user table. Now at this point we know these databases and these tables, but we don't know the structures of the tables, so we need to describe them. Describe user. And we can see here that this table has two fields on it. The first is the ID and the second is the name. The ID is an auto increment, it's a primary key, whereas the name is just a varchar of 255. So that's, for instance, a string. Okay, so what I would like to show you now is some shortcut commands within the console. So let's say, for instance, you're constructing a rather large command, and something went wrong, and you wanted to clear that command away, start afresh. Because each time if you put in that and do semicolon, you're going to get an error. In order to clear that command, so you get a clean MySQL prompt, you need to use the -c flag. So if I was to just show, if we do a select query, select all from user, and put in where item ID is equal to 5. Now this is going to fail because A, the syntax is wrong, and B, there is no item ID field in there. But let's say for example this was quite a big query, so and I don't know, first name equals John, and we have discovered that there's an error in here and we want to clear this out. So we literally just do --c. So here we haven't executed the command, we have literally cleaned it off and we've been given a fresh MySQL prompt. Similarly, if we want to print out this command, let's say it's quite long and we want to read it before we run it, we would type in, if I was just to bring some new lines in, \p. Now what that does is it prints it to the screen, so you can print it before you run it. And the last one I will show you is the \q. In fact, this isn't the last one. The last one I'll show you is \h. \h is the shortcuts to the help section, and here we can see that the \h is a shortcut to \, which is a shortcut to question mark and a shortcut to help. So there's many commands that do the same thing. So I've just shown you the clear command and the lowercase p command, but you can see here that there's all sorts of these different commands that you can run. The final one I'll show you is the \q command, which is the exit, which will exit out of the MySQL console. So my name's Peter Fisher. I blog at blog.peterfisher.me.uk. You can catch me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is pfwd. I appreciate any questions, comments, queries you have on this tutorial, and I hope to speak to you all soon. Hi, my name is Peter Fisher and welcome to the second part of the MySQL Console tutorials. Today I want to focus on dropping tables and removing tables from the database. As we can see here, that we've got one table called user on the test database that I'm about to get rid of. Now, before I remove it or drop it, as the syntax is, I must point out that once I execute the next command, the table, its structure, and any records within that table will be dropped, will be lost, and there won't be a way of retrieving that information again. So, as a word of warning, if you've got any information in that table, any records that you may need in the future, please back that table up. It goes for dropping databases as well, and also removing any records. If you've got any information that you need in the future, then do back that up. I will demonstrate how to back up tables and databases in a future episode of these this webcast. But today I'm going to focus on just removing the table from the database. So, like I mentioned before, the syntax is drop. So what we need to do is drop table, and we give it the table name, which is user. I'll just do a \p so you can get a print of that command. So drop table user. This is the table name, and this is the syntax, drop table. If I was to put a semicolon on there and press enter, it will execute this command and that table will be no more. Like so. It says query OK, 0 rows affected, and it says 0 rows affected because there isn't any rows in this table. If there was rows in this table, it will tell you how many rows have been deleted. So if I go show tables now, show tables, you can see that it's an empty set. There is no tables on this database because I've just removed the only one, the users table. So my name is Peter Fisher. I blog at blog.peterfisher.me.uk. If you've got any questions, comments, queries on this webcast or any other webcasts that I publish, then please do leave comments in the comments below, and I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can. You can also catch me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is pfwd. Thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you soon. Hi, my name's Peter Fisher and welcome to part 3 of my MySQL Console tutorials. In this tutorial I'll show you how to drop a MySQL database using the MySQL Console under Linux. So the first thing we need to do is log on to the console. -P for password. Great. Let's show the databases. Okay, so we have we've got two databases here: the information underscore schema and the test database. Now, when you delete the database, you delete and you remove all of the tables, all of their all their structure, all the records within those tables. Pretty much everything on the database is totally removed. So only do this if like me you've only got a test one, which you don't really care about, or you've backed up the database if there's any records in there that you want to keep. So anyway, to drop the database, you simply type in drop database followed by the database name. In this case it's test. And there we go. Query OK. There's no rows affected. And if we now go show databases again, we can see that there is only one database left. So my name's Peter Fisher. I blog at blog.peterfisher.me.uk. My Twitter handle is PFWD, and if you've got any questions, comments or queries about this tutorial or any other tutorials that I've published, then please leave your comments below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you very much. Hi, my name is Peter Fisher and welcome to the fourth part of the MySQL Console tutorials. In this tutorial I'll demonstrate how to create a database as well as a table within that database using the MySQL Console under Linux. So let's dive into the console then. And I'll just put in my password to get in. And if we do show databases, we can see we've just got the information schema. Now we want to create a database, and this database, for instance, is going to be called test. So the syntax is create database test. Okay, so if we do show databases again, we can see that we've just created this this database. Now the next thing we need to do is create a table. Now a table is a representation of a series of entities. Now an entity is made up of several attributes, or in in a database, in the database world, it's a series of columns, such as an ID or a first name or something that makes up this entity. In the terms of, I'll just give you a quick example. An entity could be a customer or a order or a product, where a customer entity would have multiple orders and an order entity would have multiple products. So it's a shopping cart scenario on an e-commerce website. The customer entity would be made up of a first name and a last name set of fields. A order would be made up of something like the order date, the order, the time in which the order was processed, the status of the order, whether it's been paid or not. Then there would be a series of relational links, which are called foreign keys in the database terminology, that would link to the products which are within the order. So you would have the order would have multiple links to products, because multiple products can be in an order, and a product would be made up of the product name, description, image, the date in which the product was uploaded, it itself could have links to the amount of stock that product has, and so forth. But I'll discuss foreign keys and one-to-many, many-to-many relationships later on. But just keep in mind that MySQL is a relational database structure. It allows for multiple entities to be connected in a manner of ways, and we'll discuss those later on. But today I'm just going to focus on creating a customer table, just one table with very basic information. But before I do that, I've just created this test database, and in order for me to act or perform any actions on this database, I need to use it. So just type in use test. We can see that the database pointer has been changed to the test database. So if we do show tables now, we will see that this is completely empty because this is a nice fresh test database that we've just created. So let's move on to creating a table then. So let's do the can't spell create table syntax. So create table, and we're going to call it customer. Now I'm going to do this on several lines because it's easier for me to input and for you to read. So create table customer, we hit enter. Now all the fields, all the things that make up a customer are represented in a bracketed, comma separated list. So within the brackets we have the first of all we have the field name, and then we have a series of data types and attributes of this field. So for example, the first one we're going to put in is the ID. Now the ID is going to be, the customer ID is the unique identifier for the customer entity, the customer record. So this will be an integer or an int. It is going to be the primary key. Now I'm not going to touch too much on the primary key today, but it's the unique identifier for, it is the primary index for the for this record, if you will. It is going to be auto incremented, which means that every time a new customer record is added, the ID is incremented once, and it just means that this record has it's a unique identifier, which is the ID, which is the primary key. So we'll do a comma for the next line down. So ID int primary key auto underscore. Yeah, that's fine. Spelling's alright. And this one is going to be the first name. First underscore name. It's always good to keep your field names lowercase and underscore. It's personal preference to have it lowercase, but do keep underscores in, because when you're programming, it's very, it can be a bit of a chore to deal with spaces in programming. So it's always good to either use a camel case or lowercase with an underscore to separate the words. So the first name will be a varchar, which means that it is a string, and we are going to give it 30 characters. So that's the length of the string. So the first name can have a maximum of 30 characters. And we'll do the next one, and we'll give it a last name. We'll also last name, and we'll also give that a varchar of 30 as well. So that's all I'm going to do for now. I'm only going to do the integers and the varchars. In the future episodes, I'll touch on different data types, like date time and I don't know, password, for instance. That's a good one. So let's close the bracket and the semicolon, and this, fingers crossed, if I've done this correctly, will create the customer table, which it has. So if we do, don't know why I sounded surprised there, show tables, to show the table, we can see that the customer table has now been created. Now I'll also show you how to explain this table. So explain, or actually describe customer. Now what this is doing is it's just giving you a nice output of the structure of this table, and all its fields. So for example, you've got the fields here, the ID, first name and last name. You can see there the field type, or the data type. That's what I've just mentioned. You can see that the first name and last name is null, whereas the ID isn't. So that means that the first name and last name, they don't have to be there, but the ID does, because it is the primary key. It is the uniquely identified key. None of these have a default value, so that basically means that if you don't supply anything, it will give it a default value, and we haven't added one of those in. And the extra bit is any extra attributes, and as we can see on the ID, we have an auto incremented extra, and we can see here that there's 3 rows within this. So that's how you create a table and add it to a new database. Hey, Peter Fisher here, and today I'm going to show you how to change the nullable values of a column in the table that we created, the customers table that we created a couple of episodes ago. So I'm going to jump into the MySQL console. So MySQL -u for the username, putting in username, password. There we go. Let's just clear the screen. So we're going to use the test database that we created before, and I'll just show the tables. Marvelous. Right, so we've got the customer table, and I'll just describe that. Excellent. Okay, so this is a fairly simple, straightforward table here. We've got 3 columns. The first one, ID, has a nullable value of no. That basically means that the ID field must be present at all times. It can't be a blank field. It's the primary key, and that's partly the reason why it can't be null. But it's also handled by the auto increment field, which means that for every record in the database, for every customer record in the customers table, the ID will be incremented automatically. So we don't necessarily need to worry about that too much, but it's the first and last names that we want to change, because at the moment they're both set to yes. Now that basically means that for the first and last names, these values can be blank, and for the customer database, we actually want these to be populated each time. So we need to change this this null value to be no, just like the ID. So in order to do this, we simply modify this this customers table and changing those values. So to do that, we alter the table, and the argument is the table name, so that's customer. And press enter to bring up another line, and then we want to modify the column, and the column name is the first argument, so that's first name. Second argument is the data type, and at the moment it's set to varchar 30. We want to keep it to varchar 30, and so we need to add it as well. So varchar 30. If I was to change this to be varchar 255 or even an int or any kind of data type, that would change as well in this command. So you can add different changes, modifications in one step. But at the moment, we're only concerned with the null value. So we want to make sure that it's not null, and we're going to bring up a comma, because we want to work on the last name too. So last name, modify last name, specifying the data type, which is varchar 30, and it's not null. Okay, that looks pretty good to me, so I'm going to press enter, and those modifications should have taken place. So I'll describe the table again, and we can see that yes, the null value has changed to no, which means that it can't be blank, it can't be null. Now if I wanted to change them back, I would simply run this again, but removing the the not. Sorry. There we go. So run that, describe, and we can see that it's changed back to how it previously was. I might as well just, not. There we go. There we go. Okay, so that's exactly how we want it. Alright, so that's how you update the null values. I shall speak to you all soon. Cheers. Bye. Peter Fisher here. In the last webcast I described how to change the MySQL column definition of null from not null back to null and vice versa. In this demonstration, I'm going to show you how to add a column, how to delete a column, and how to rename a column from the MySQL table. So in MySQL at the moment, and if I was to describe the customer table, it would be exactly as it was beforehand. So we want to add another column here, and we want to add the email address. So to do that, we type in alter table, and we issue the table name, which is customer. We issue the command that we want to alter the table with, so add, and then the email underscore address, which is the column name or field name address. We want to give the data type of that column, which is varchar 60 or whatever you wish to choose, and we're going to make sure that it's not null as well. Okay, good. So there we go, we've added the email address in. Now what happens down the line if your application changes and instead of email underscore address you need to change that to be email? Now there's one or two ways you could do this. The first way, which isn't the recommended way, but I'll show you anyway, is dropping the email underscore address and re-adding a new column called email. Okay, so we would do that by alter table customer, and it's drop, that's the drop command, email underscore address. Okay, so there you go, it's been deleted. So now I wish to I wish to just re-add the email. So there you go. So that's one way of renaming, shall we say, the column by removing it and then re-adding the new column. It's not great. The reason why it's not great is because you could potentially have a lot of records in this table, and if you drop one of these columns, then the data will be removed, obviously, because it's attached to that field. So instead, what you want to do is rename the column, the field name on the fly, which is what I'll demonstrate now. So let's have a look. So yes, it's called email now. So I'm going to just drop that again and rename that back to email address. So So bring it back to as it was. Fine. Okay, now I want to change that column. I don't want to drop it. I don't want to re-add it. I want to change it. So alter table customer, and I want to change, that's the command I want to give it. I want to change it to email underscore address. I want to change email underscore address to be email. And I can't just do that because I need to also give the options that define that column, that email column. So I need to do varchar 60. Okay. So if I was to describe that table, then I haven't actually dropped that field, I've just renamed it. Now, one thing you need to be careful with on here is you need to specify all the options that define that field. So as we can see beforehand, it was not null. Because I didn't define that here, it's just gone to the default value of yes. So ideally what I should have done was, let's drop that again. Let's add that back. Let's describe the customer table. So there we go. Let's see where the null was set to null. No. What I want to do is change the email to email address back to email, give it a varchar 60, but also specify not null. Okay, so you need to make sure that you copy the options that were previously defined on the column that you wish to change. Otherwise, they're just going to revert back to their default states. So if I hit that now and then hit describe, you can see that the only thing that's changed here is the field name. So from email address to email, I've made sure that the varchar is exactly the same, and I've also made sure that the null value here is both set to no. Okay, so that's how you add, remove, or in MySQL's terminology, it's drop, and change a field. Hi, Peter Fisher here. In this webcast for the MySQL Console tutorials, I'm going to demonstrate how to change the default column in a table schema. So we're going to use the customer table as we've done before. So I'm in MySQL Console now, and I can just describe the customers table. And it is as it was before. We've got the email column in there that we added last time. And this for this webcast, I'm going to talk about the default column here and how to change it and what it does and so forth. In doing so, I'm going to add three additional fields to this table. And the first one I'm going to do is active. So to do that, we do alter table, specify the table name, which is customer, and then we add is underscore active. Now I'm going to specify that the data type is an integer which has a size of 1, and I'm going to default that to be 0. Notice I'm not bothering with the null column here. So I enter that, describe the customer. I'll just do that on a new line for you. Okay, so we've added the isActive flag. It's set to an integer with a size of 1. It can be null, but the default is set to 0. Basically, that means that if a record gets added to the customer table that doesn't have the isActive field specified, the default value will always be set to 0. Now, as I've set the size to 1, it means that only one integer can be used. So it can't be 10, it can't be 12, but it can be 1, it can be 2, it can be 3, it can be 4, and so forth. The reason why I've added 0 is because in the context of this system, if isActive is set to 0, it means that the account is deactivated. It's no longer active. So we're kind of adding a little bit of logic here, which basically says that for any customer that hasn't been for any new customer that has that set to, that hasn't got that set, sorry, is a deactivated customer. So in any queries that we have in the system, we should check for the isActive flag. Now, when the customer gets deleted, their data doesn't actually get removed from the database. It doesn't get dropped. All we're doing here is we're just changing that from 1 to 0. So if they are active, that would be set, that value would be 1. And obviously if they're deactivated, it would be set to 0. So that's how that works. So next we're going to alter the table again, which is customer, and we're going to add another field called gender. Now this is going to be a string, so this is going to be a varchar, and for argument's sake we're just going to have 13, and we're going to default that to be male. So let's describe. So okay, so we've got the gender column that we've just added, so 13 varchar, and the default is male. So this is a choice, so gender could be male, female, what have you. If it isn't supplied, then it's the default would be set to male. This is just a way of making sure that the data follows some sort of rule set. So the next one we're going to add is title, which is very similar to gender. So alter table customer add title. This is going to be a varchar, and I'm going to set it to 10. And I'm going to default this to be, let's default that to be Mr. Okay, so we've added the title, it's Mr. It kind of works because it's the default is male, which means that if any of these three columns are not specified in the query, then their default values will be 0, male, and a Mr. So that's how you manipulate the default value in the table schema. I shall speak to you all soon. Thank you. Bye. Hello, Peter Fisher here. Welcome to another MySQL Console webcast. In the last episode, we looked at changing the default value of the MySQL table schema. And in this episode, we're going to look at changing the extra column in the table schema. So let's dive right in. We're in the MySQL console now, so let's describe the customer table. So it is as it was before, with the new fields isActive, gender, and title that we put in the last episode with these default fields. Today we want to focus on this extra section here and what it does and how to change it. So we can see that we've already got an extra section in here for the ID field, and that's set to auto_increment. What that does is that it tells MySQL that for every new record, its ID needs to be incremented, which means that we don't need to worry about the ID field when we're inserting new records, because MySQL will handle that for us. So what I want to do now is add two new column types, got two new fields to this table, the first being created date and the second being updated date, and manipulating this extra field. So let's alter table customer, and we're going to add created date. We're going to set the data type to be date time. We're going to specify that it's not null, and we're going to set the default to be the current time stamp. Okay, so there we go. So we've added that one in. So it's a date time, it's not null, and the default is a current timestamp. This basically means that for every new record that gets inserted, there is a created date field, and that the value is automatically set to the current timestamp, the timestamp of the time that the record gets inserted. So I want to add another one called updated date. So let's alter the table again, customer, and we want to add another column, and we want to call it updated date. We want to also say that it's a date time, and we want to say that it's not null again, and its default is also current timestamp. But for each time we update the record, we also want to automatically update this value. So, excuse me. So we want to specify a rule that is triggered every time this this record gets changed. So we want to do on update current timestamp. Okay, so I'll just walk you through that again. So we alter the table customer, we add a new column called updated date. We set the updated date's data type to be date time, and we specifying that it's going to be not null, which means that it cannot be empty. We're setting the default value to be current timestamp, which means that if no value is specified, then it will be set to its current timestamp. We're then creating a rule which will be triggered on update, and on update we're going to set the value to the current timestamp. So enter that, and then describe the customer again, and there we go. We can see that we've got these two columns in here, the difference being the updated date has this extra section which basically says that for every time this record gets updated, the value gets changed to being the current timestamp. So we've got two values that we've just added that are automatic. The first one is the created date. That will be set whenever the record is inserted. Okay, we don't have to worry about that ever again when updating or inserting records. The second one is the updated date, and that gets changed every time the record gets updated. Again, we don't have to specify that from the system's point of view, because MySQL will handle that using this onUpdate trigger that we've specified. Okay, so that's how to manipulate the extra field, and I shall speak to you all again soon. Thank you. Bye. My name's Peter Fisher, and welcome to another MySQL Console tutorial. Today we're going to take a look at inserting records in a MySQL table. So we're in the console right now, and if I was to describe the customer table, we can see the table's structure. So in this table we've got several fields here, and some of them have default values. So for instance, the isActive, the gender, the title, the created date, and the updated date, they all have default values. Now what that means is that for every record that gets entered into the table without a one of these fields supplied, the default value will be used. So if I go and insert a record that doesn't have the isActive field, then its value will be set to 0. And likewise, if I supply a record that doesn't have the title, then its value will be set to Mr. Other things to note here is that the ID field is a primary key, and it's got an extra setting of auto increment. Now basically what that means is that for every record that gets added to this table without the ID supplied, its value will be incremented based on the last inserted ID. So the first one will be 1, the second one will be 2, and so forth. Other things to note is that the updated date has an extra setting of onUpdate current timestamp. Now we don't need to worry about that too much today, because that's an onUpdate trigger. So that will change the value of the updated date to the current timestamp when the record is updated. Now we're inserting records, so we don't need to worry about that too much. Okay, so let's get to it. So we're going to insert a record into the customer table, and it's quite verbose. You literally do insert into, and then you supply the customer name, or the table name, which is customer. And then what we need to do is open up a bracket. We're going to run that on another line, and we're going to supply all the fields that we want to associate values to. So I'm going to do two examples. The first example, I'm going to insert a record with all the fields supplied, and then on the second example, I'll only supply the minimum set of fields that this table can use. So let's add a comma separated list of all the fields. So for ID, first name, last name, email, is active, gender, title, created date, and updated date. Now these don't need to be in the order that they're added into this table. They could be in any order. So updated date. Right, that looks good to me. So I'm just double checking that each field is spelt correctly, and they're separated by a comma, which they are. So I'm going to open up another line, and I'm going to close that bracket off. The next thing we need to do is supply a list of values or records that we want to insert into this table. And we do that by quite simply doing values, and then we open up a bracket. Now for every record that we want to add to this table, we have a bracketed list like so, okay? But we're only going to put in one for now. So I'm going to open up another line, and then we need to supply all the values that are associated to the fields. So for example, the first value here will be the ID. So as it's an integer of 11, I'm going to just put in 1. And then the next one is the first name. Now the first name is varchar with a size of 30. So that needs to be in quotes. So I'm just going to have Peter. And then last name is Fisher. Then what have we got? The email, which is just a dummy email. So tester@test.com. And then the is active, which is an integer with a size of 1, which means that it can be 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, but it can't be 12 or 10 or 316. Okay, so we're just going to supply that of 1. And then we're going to, what's next? The gender, which I will put as male. And then the title, I'll just use the default, which is Mr. Okay, now we've got to the created date and the updated date. So for these, I'm going to use the MySQL function of now. Now that's going to return the current timestamp that the function is executed on. So that's fine, because that's what we need, the current timestamps. So I'm just going to double check. And what I'm doing here is I'm making sure that each of these values are associated with each of the fields that are supplied, which is fine, and making sure that the quotes are in the right places and the commas are separating each one. That looks good to me. So I'll open up another line, and then I'll close the bracket. Now, as I said before, if I wanted to add another value, I would just keep doing that, adding records as I go. But for now, I'm only going to do the one. So let's insert that. Okay, so that's ran. One query was one row has been affected. So I'm going to just clear the screen and then do a quick select all from, and then the customer table. Okay, so as we can see, that's the first record that's been inserted. So let's insert another record, but only use the minimum amount of fields that are required for this table. So let's clear that screen again and go describe customer again. So let's just see what are the minimum amount of fields that we can use. So we don't need the updated date, we don't need the created date, because they've got the default of current timestamp. We don't need the title because that will be set to Mr. We don't need gender because that will be set to male. We don't need is active because that's set to 0. We also don't need the ID because that will be auto-incremented if we don't supply it. So first name, last name, and email, they don't have default values and they're not nullable. You see here that their null is set to no, which means that they are required. So just to test that out, we'll do insert into, and then customer. And we're going to just have for now, we're just going to insert the first name. And we're going to say values, and we're just going to put in dummy. Okay, so we're just going to insert the first record with just the first name, and we're going to see if we can get away with just doing that. And if we press enter, we can see that we get the error of last underscore name doesn't have a default value. Okay, which it doesn't because it's set to null and it cannot be null. So let's put in the last name. And we're going to just put in Rogers. And we can see that now we have the error of field email doesn't have a default value. So I'm just going to put in the email field and then just supply a dummy email address, dummy at hotmail.com. And yes, we can see that the record has now been inserted. So that's been inserted with the minimum amount of fields required for this database, for this table. Now, if this when we run a select, we'll be able to see that the updated and the created dates have been set to the current timestamp, which is the timestamp that this query has been executed in. The title should be male, and the gender should be male, the title should be Mr., and the is active should be set to 0. Also, the ID should be incremented, which means that its value should also be 2. So let's just go and select all from customer. Oh, actually, I'm going to just do that on another line. Select all from customer. And yes, we can see that the second record was added with the ID of 2. So that's been set through the auto increment extra setting. The is active is set to 0. The gender is set to male, and the title is set to Mr. And the created and updated dates have been changed. Thank you for watching. Please click the like button if you found it useful, and make sure to subscribe to get the next tutorial. If you have any comments, questions, or queries, then please leave them in the comments section below. Alternatively, you can tweet them to my Twitter handle, which is PFWD. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon. Welcome to another How to Code Well video tutorial. My name's Peter Fisher, and today we're going to take a look at running select queries from the MySQL console. So we're in the console right now, and I just want to do a quick describe of the customer table. So this is going to return the structure of the customer table. And in today's tutorial, I will demonstrate 3 different examples. So the first example of the select query will be to demonstrate how to return all of the records in the customer table. The second example will be a demonstration of how to only return certain fields from this table. And lastly, the third example will be a demonstration of how to reduce the results set using a where clause in the select query. Okay, so let's dive right in. So the first example then is returning all of these records. So we do that by running select, and then it's on a Mac it's Shift 8. So that is in MySQL language, that's all. So select all from, and then we supply the name of the table that we want to run the select from. So in this case, it's the customer table. So select all from customer. I'm going to run that on another line. Okay, so as you can see, we've returned 7 rows. And this is the format. We've got all the genders, all the titles, the isActives, the emails, the first and the last names and the IDs and so forth. Now it's wrapped around like this because where you can see the dates are on a second row, and that's because the terminal window here is a bit small. But that's the first example. So I'm just going to clear the screen and then describe the customer table again. So the second example then is to return certain fields from this customer table. For instance, you might not want to return the ID or the gender or what have you. You might just want to be saying, right, I only want to find the first name and last names from this table. So we do that by running select, and instead of passing the asterisk, we pass a comma separated list of fields that we wish to return. So in this case, it's first underscore name and last underscore name. Again, from the customer table. Whoops. Customer. If I can spell today, that would be great. Customer table. Okay, so I'm going to run that on another line, and we can see that only the first and last names have been returned. And we can see that all of them have been returned because 7 rows have been returned, which is what we got last time. Okay, so lastly, I'm going to just describe the table again. We want to reduce the result set based on a where condition. So, for instance, the isActive field here, it's got a size of 1 and its default is set to 0, so it's an integer. So let's pull out all the records that have the isActive value set to 0. So we can do that by running this again, but I'll also supply the isActive field from customer where is_active is equal to 0. So we're going to return the first name and the last name, as well as the isActive field from the customer table where the isActive value, the value of the isActive field, is set to 0. So I'm going to run that on another line. Okay, so we can see that 4 rows have been returned, and these have the first names and last names all have the isActive. All these customers have the isActive field set to 0. Now we've only got 4 rows here, so that must mean that there are some other rows that have a different value of 0. And we can find that out by running this again, but instead of where it's equal to 0, we're going to put in an exclamation mark, because that means that this statement must return false. So where it's anything but 0. Okay, so let's run that. Okay, so we can see that 3 rows this time have been returned, and there is active flag is set to 1. So I can run that again, but this time I can change that and say where it's set to 1. And I'm going to just run that on another line, and we can see that the same result set has been returned. Okay, so that's how that's running 3 basic examples of the select query. We can go into more depth later down the line. There's all sorts of things that we can do, such as likes and nots and all those kind of conditions, as well as group by and order by. But for now, that's just a basic overview of how to run select in MySQL Console. Thank you for watching. Please click the like button if you found it useful, and make sure to subscribe to get the next tutorial. If you have any comments, questions or queries, then please leave them in the comments section below. Alternatively, you can tweet them to my Twitter handle, which is PFWD. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon. Hello, welcome to another How to Code Well video tutorial. My name is Peter Fisher, and today we're going to focus on updating records from a MySQL table. So we're in the console right now, and I'm going to do a quick select all from customer. Now this is going to return all of the records in the customer table. We can see that we have 7 records, 7 rows in this table, and all of the records have the is_active value set to 0. Okay, so let's go and change some of these records to have a different value of the isActive field. But before we do that, we need to find out what value we can actually set it to. So we do a describe of the customer table. So this is going to bring back the schema of the customer table. And from the schema, we can find out that the is_active field has a data type of an integer with a size of 1. This means that we can set it to 1 or 2 or 3, but we can't set it to something like 300 or 5,000 or anything that is larger than 1 character. Okay, so, and we can't set it to a varchar, so we can't set it to a string, for example. So let's clear the screen and let's run an update. So I'm just going to select all from customer again. Now let's just update one of these records, okay? So in order to do that, we would run an update query, and we want to supply the name of the table that we wish to update. So in this case, it's going to be customer, and we want to supply the set keyword. And then after the set keyword, we need to supply the fields and their values, or the new values that we want to update them to. So in this case, it's is_active. And then we're going to equal that to the new value that we wish to set. So in this case, I'm going to set the isActive field to 1. So I'm just going to run that and I'm going to see what happens. Okay, so let's press enter, and we can see that 7 rows were actually affected, 7 were matched and 7 were changed. So the reason why 7 rows were altered was because we didn't supply the where clause. So when we've done the update customer set isActive to 1, we've actually gone and updated all of the records and set all of the is_active fields to have a value of 1. So it's very important that when you go and update records in MySQL, you need to supply, or you need to reduce the query by only the records that you want to change, okay? Otherwise, you'll do what I've just done and update all of the records. I can show you that by, if I was to do a select, we can see that they've all now been changed to 1. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just put them back to be, put them all back to 0. And let's run that so we can see that they're all set to 0. And let's just focus on the second record here, the second row. Okay, so how do we go about only updating the isActive field, the value, and changing that to be 1 just for that record? Well, in order to do that, we would run the update again, we'd set that to 1, but we would also supply a where clause. Now this is going to reduce the query by whatever matches the where clause, and the next thing we need to give the where clause is a field that we want to reduce it by. So in this case, it's going to be the ID. We're going to choose the ID because that's the primary key, and the primary key is the unique identifier. It's auto-incrementing, which means that for every record that's been added to the database, we can almost guarantee, pretty much guarantee that the value will always be incremented, and therefore there won't be a value of the same, there won't be an ID with the same value. So we can safely say that where ID is equal to 2 will only change this record here. Okay, so we're going to update the customer, we're going to set the isActive field, we're going to set that value to be 1, but we're only going to do it to the record that has the ID that has that value of 2. So let's run that, and we can see, yes, only 1 row has been affected, 1 was matched and 1 was changed. So let's clear the screen and run the select again, and we can see that only that record has been changed. Now we can update multiple fields in one query. So we would do that by running, and let me just change that to 3. So let's just focus on the record with the ID of 3 now. And we're going to set that to be is_active of 1, but we're also going to have a comma, and then we're going to add or supply another field, another value to change. So in this case, we're going to set the first name. We're just going to set that to be test. Now I know that this value is a varchar, so it's a string. Okay, so this should work. So let's run the enter,
and then select. So yeah, we can see that the ID of 3 has the first name changed to test, and it's also is active value has also been changed to 1. Now also note that the updated underscore date also gets changed whenever the values get altered, and that's because if I was to clear the screen again and just go back to describing this customer, we can see that the updated underscore date has a extra setting on update. It changes the value to the current timestamp. This means that for every update of a record, its updated underscore date gets changed to the current timestamp, and that current timestamp is based on the time that the query was ran. Okay, so that's how you would update records in a MySQL table. Thank you for watching. Please click the like button if you found it useful, and make sure to subscribe to get the next tutorial. If you have any comments, questions or queries, then please leave them in the comments section below. Alternatively, you can tweet them to my Twitter handle, which is PFWD. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon. My name's Peter Fisher. Welcome to another MySQL Console tutorial. Today we're going to talk about aliasing within a MySQL Console query. So we're in the console right now, and if I was to describe the customer table, we can see its structure, and if I did a quick select all from customer, we can see its contents. So let's say, for instance, we want to change the first name and last name to be something like F1 and F2. So we would need to create an alias of the first name and last name to something different. Now there's two ways of doing this. The first way is to specify the alias straight after the field name. And I'll show you an example of that now. So let's clear that, run that back for reference, and then we do select, and then we say, okay, I want the first name, and instead of doing a comma and then straight into last name like we did before, we enter a space and then we add the alias that we want the first name to be. So in this case we want F1, and then with last name we would want F2, and then we would continue the query as usual. So that's from, and then the table name, which in this case is customer. Let's open that up, and we can see that first name and last name has been changed to F1 and F2. So that's one way of doing that. The second way of doing that, and if I was to just clear the screen, run that back for reference, is to specify the as keyword. Now the as keyword isn't required, but in my opinion it works quite well because it makes the query more readable. So let's try that. So select first name as F1, comma, last name as F2, and then from customer. Okay, so it's the same query, but we've added the as keyword between the field name and its alias. In my opinion, that makes it more readable because we know that anything with as is an alias because the thing on the right is an alias to the thing on the left. I find that quite difficult to read because we're relying on the space in between, and if we forget the comma, then we get an error. So the next thing we will look at is using the alias within a where clause. So let's bring that back, run that again. So let's do a select first name as F1, last name as F2, from customer. Now I'm going to create an alias of customer, and I'm going to call that C. Okay, where, and then I'm going to reference the alias. I'm going to reference the table, so that's C, and then I'm going to go dot, and then I'm going to have is active is equal to 1. So that'll bring back both records. So let's enter that. We can see that it's returned both the records again because the isActive flag is set to 1. But we've used a reference, we've used an alias of customer as C, and we've gone c.isActive. Excuse me, well, this is fairly useful when we're joining tables together. So you could have multiple tables in a query that you're joining, and these tables could have the same field name. So for instance, the ID is a good example, the primary key, the uniquely identified key. You could have a customer table and you could have an orders table, and you could be selecting all orders from a particular set of customer IDs. Because you've got two IDs in, two fields called IDs in both the customer and the orders table, you would need some way of aliasing that C or T1 or whatever you've called it is the customers table, and T2 or O or whatever is the orders table. So you would do where CID is equal to, I don't know, 5, and then it's join that onto the orders ID. I'll come on to joins a little bit down the line. We're not quite ready for that yet, but this is the basics to aliasing. It will help later down the line in the other tutorials. If you've got any questions, queries, then do put them in the comments, and I'll try and get to them as soon as I can. But yes, this is how you create aliases in MySQL. Thanks again, and I'll speak to you all soon. Bye. Peter Fisher, and welcome to another MySQL Console tutorial. Today we're going to look at the MySQL function concat. Now what concat does is it concatenates a series of values into a single string. Okay, so let's we're in the MySQL console now, and we'll just take a look at what that function does. So let's run. So to run it in a query, you would run select, and then you would type concat, which is the function's name. Open up the parentheses, and then in here you would have an arbitrary set of values which are split or separated by a comma. So these can be strings, these can be integers, and so forth. So let's say we've got apples. Let's say we've got oranges. And let's say we've got a number, which is 1. Okay. So let's execute that, and we can see that we've got oranges, apples, and the number 1. We can also see that the name of this column is the function and its contents. So that's all well and good, but let's see if we can put in a space between the apples, oranges, and the number 1. So to do that, there is a number of ways to do this. One of which is another function that I will mention in another webcast, but for now I'll just keep to this single function. So basically what you do is you concatenate a string with a blank space between each one of these. So apples, and then space, and then oranges, and then space. Okay, making sure that you've got the commas in the right place and the quotes in the right place as well. Okay, so let's hit enter, and we can see that we've got a space between apples and oranges. Right, okay, so that's all well and good, but how do we use this within a query? So let's clear that, bring up another line. I'm going to just describe the customer table to see its structure, and then I'm going to do a quick select all from customer to see its contents. Okay, so we've got, what can we use here? We've got the title, the first name, and the last name. Right, okay, so the aim for this example will be to create a single column, and we're going to call it name, and it's going to be a single string that is a concatenation of the title, the first name, and the last name. Okay, so let's bring up a new line, bring that up for reference. So we would do select, and then we would run concat, and we would have title, because that's the the customer's title, and then we would have comma, and then we would have first underscore name, and then we would have last underscore name. Close the parentheses, and then do from, we continue the query as usual, from customer. Okay, that looks good to me. So we press enter to execute the query. So we've got, okay, so we've got the return values here, Mr., Peter, and Fisher, and so forth. So what we would like to do is have a space between each one of these values. So again, we would add in a blank space between each one of these values. And because it's a string, it would be in a quote. So run that again, and yes, we can see that we've added in the space. Now the next thing we want to do is change the name of that column. We want to change the name to be name. Okay, so let's bring up a blank space, bring that up for reference, and then we would do that by simply aliasing, which is something I mentioned in a previous video, the return of that concat function. So we do as, and then we change, well, we add the alias of name. So there we go. We've changed the returned name of that column to be name, because that's the alias of the return of the concat function. Okay, so that's basically how you use the concat function. There's other ways of manipulating the separator, as I've mentioned beforehand, but we'll go into that in more detail in another video. If you've got any comments, questions, or queries, then do put them in the comments below. I try and post a video up every week, so please subscribe and like to get the next one. Thanks again for watching, and I'll speak to you all again soon. Cheers, bye. My name is Peter Fisher, and welcome to another MySQL Console tutorial. Today we're going to continue the thread of string manipulation functions, and we're going to look at the upper function of MySQL. So we're in the console right now, and if I was to just describe the customer table to show you the table structure, and I'll do a quick select all from customer to show the records within that table. So we're going to look at the upper function today, and the upper function capitalizes the string, the value of the string. So for example, if we use the upper function and we use that against the first name here, then the name Peter would be capitalized. We could do this with any string as well. So for example, title, that would be a capital MR. Okay, let's do that. So let's clear the screen, bring that up for reference, and it's select, and we're going to just select out the title and the first underscore name, as well as the ID from customer. Okay, so we're going to work with these fields at the moment. So I will bring that up, and we want to uppercase the title. So upper, and then put in the field name that you want to uppercase, so title, comma, first name, and then ID. And we are doing this from the customer table. So we enter, and we can see that the title has now been uppercased, and the name of the column is the function. So what we could do is, let's bring that up again, is create an alias as we've done before in previous videos. So alias that to title. So there we go. So we've got an uppercase of the title, and we've changed the name of the returned column back to title. So there's another uppercase function that we can use. It's called ucase. Upper is just a synonym for ucase, so we can do that like so. I'll just run that. So ucase. Okay, so we can see that the first name has been uppercased, and the name of this column is ucase and then the first name. And as before, we can alias that as well. So as first underscore name, and there we go. So that's how you simply uppercase a string using the upper or ucase MySQL functions. If you've got any questions, queries or comments, please leave them in the comments below. Please subscribe and like the video. I try and upload a video every week, so please do that in order to get the next one. Excellent. Well, we'll speak to you all again soon. Thank you again for watching. Bye. My name is Peter Fisher and welcome to another MySQL Console tutorial. Last week we looked at the upper and the ucase functions to capitalize strings. Today we're going to reverse that and look at the lower function to lowercase strings. So we're in MySQL Console right now, and I will, as before, I will describe the customer table. So that's how the structure of the table looks like, and I'll do a quick select all from customer to return the records. So let's say we want to lowercase the first name and the last name, and we want to keep everything else as it is. So let's have that on another screen, and then we will do select, and then we want the first name and we want the last name, and I'm also going to return the ID, and it's from the customer table. Okay, so they're the three columns that we're going to play with, and I want to lowercase the first name. So in order to do that, I'll just bring that up on the new screen, and we select and we use the lower MySQL function, and the argument we pass in is the field of the table that we want to lowercase. So in this case it's first name, and then we have a comma, and we want last name, and then comma, and then ID. And these fields are from the customer table, like so. Okay, so we've lowercased the first name, and as you can see here, the column that's returned is the function lower, and then the argument is first name. So what we can do, as we've done before, is if we go up on here, we can alias the returned column name as first underscore name. I'll press enter on that to execute, and we've changed the name of that column back to first name. Okay, so select lower first name, so that lowercase is the first name. We've then aliased the return of that function to be called first name, and then we're selecting the rest of the fields as normal. So there's another method that will lowercase, which can perform the lowercase function, and that's called lcase. So we'll just do that now. So let's bring that back up for reference, and then let's lowercase lcase the last name. So there we go. So the last name is also lowercased. As before, if we go back, we can set that as an alias. So as last underscore name, and there we are. The first name and last name have been lowercased. So if you've got any questions, comments, or queries, then please leave a comment below. I try and create a video every week, so please subscribe and like. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Hi, my name is Peter Fisher, and welcome to another MySQL Console tutorial. Today we're going to take a look at a MySQL function called concat _ws. This is a string manipulation function of MySQL. So let's let's pull out the fields that we're going to play with today, and that's select title first underscore name, and then last underscore name from the customer table. Yeah, that looks fine. Okay, so we've got those three fields that we're going to play with. Now, in a previous video, I was talking about the concat MySQL function. Today we're going to take a look at the concat underscore ws function and its differences. But I'll just do a quick recap on the concat method itself. So the concat method concatenates a series of values or fields representing values of records into a single string. Now, as demonstrated before, the string won't be separated by anything. So it won't be a comma separated string, or it won't be a space separated string. It will just be a single string. So select concat, and we're going to say title, we're going to say first name, and then last name, and then from, and then the customer table. Okay, so do you see what I mean? It's just a single string with no separation in between, in between the values that you've asked to be concatenated. Now, in the previous video, I showed how to actually manually add separation in between each one, and that's pretty much what I'm doing here. You need to manually add extra arguments for separation. Now, that's all well and good when you've only got a couple of values to concatenate, but what happens if you've got lots of values? It's going to be tiresome to do that, as well as prone to error. So that's where the concat underscore ws function steps in. Now, the ws stands for with separation, so that's concatenation with separation. Let's just clear the screen and I'll give you an example. So select, and then it's concat underscore ws. Now the first argument will be the separator. So in this case, we're going to go for a blank string, which will be the white space. And then we continue the function call by adding an arbitrary list of values or fields representing values to concatenate. So in this case, it'll be title, first name, and then last name. And then we close the brace, and it's from the customer table. So I've just double checked that. So we're selecting a concatenated string. We're separating it by a blank space here, white space. We're asking for the title, first name, and the last name from the customer table. That looks good to me. So let's run that, and you can see that we've added a space in between each one, and that's done by the first argument of this concat underscore ws function. Now, of course, we can add any kind of separator into here. So for instance, this could be, I don't know, a comma. It could even be a number. It doesn't have to be a string. It could be numeric. And so we've added a comma in between each one. Okay, so that's concat underscore ws, concatenation with white space. If you've got any comments, questions, or queries, please let me know. Please put them in the comments below, and I'll try and get to them as soon as I can. Like the video if you found it helpful, and subscribe to get the next set of videos. I try and publish a video a week. And thank you very much for watching. See you next time. Hello, my name is Peter Fisher, and welcome to another MySQL Console tutorial. Today we're going to look at the MySQL function ASCII. Now, what the ASCII function does is it returns the ASCII value of the leftmost character of the provided string. So I'm going to do that in a select query to demonstrate. So select ASCII, and the provided string will be tester. Okay, let's execute that query. And that's returned a value of 116. So 116 is the ASCII value of the leftmost character of the string tester.
Now, when I say leftmost character, I mean the character at the very left position of the string tester. And in this case, that would be a T. By means of demonstration, if I was to reduce that string all the way down to T, it will still be 116, and that is because that is the only character that's been provided. If I was to enter a TA for ta, that would still be 116, because this function will only get the ASCII value of the leftmost character of the provided string. So that in this case is T. So let's clear that down. Now it's worth noting that the ASCII value that's returned will be different depending on whether or not the string is an uppercase or a lowercase string. And by means of demonstration, if I was to run, if I take that off and run that through upper. So what I'm doing here is I've provided the upper function, and I've provided the argument of a lowercase t, so that's going to uppercase that to be uppercase T, and then I've put that within the ASCII function, so it's going to find the ASCII value of the uppercase T, and in this case it's 84. So as a better demonstration, let me clear that down. I'll remove the nested functions and say as lowercase, and then comma, run the ASCII again, but this time have an uppercase T, and alias that to be uppercase. Okay, so what that's doing is it's getting the ASCII value of lowercase t, aliasing that to lowercase, then getting the ASCII value of the uppercase T, and then aliasing that to uppercase. So we can see the two values here. Lowercase is 116 and uppercase is 84. Now, if for any reason you provide an empty string, the ASCII value will be 0, and I'll just demonstrate that now. So, like so. So the ASCII value is 0 because I provided an empty string. Now, if you were to provide null for some reason, the return would also be null. So that's the MySQL function ASCII. If you've got any comments, questions, or queries, then please let me know in the comments below. If you found the video helpful, then please like it and subscribe to pick up the next videos. I try and do a video a week. But for now, thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you next time. Bye.